The Barbados economy has grown by 4.1% in the first quarter of 2024. This is despite elevated foreign interest rates, geopolitical tensions, higher freight costs, and adverse local weather conditions.
What drove the first quarter performance was an extraordinary performance in terms of tourist arrivals. We had about 228,828 tourists on island for the first quarter. That's the highest on record any year.
Arrivals from the United States surged by 47.6%, Canada increased by 21%, but United Kingdom contracted slightly by 0.2%. However, arrival numbers remain above the pre-pandemic level. The cruise sector is also recovering with an additional 15 cruise ship calls this year compared to last. The performance in tourism spilled over, and there has been broad-based growth in other sectors, including manufacturing, construction, and wholesale.
However, we saw declines in agriculture, reflecting mainly the harsh weather conditions, extreme heat conditions, and intermediate bouts of rain. And that meant that food crop, agriculture, root crop, fruits, other meats, milk production, most of those things were affected tremendously by the extreme weather conditions, and therefore they were down.
As it relates to inflation, whilst globally declining, other factors are contributing to domestic prices.
Now, what we saw is an easing of international prices, which will have put downward pressure on the inflation rate. But at the same time, because of the adverse weather condition impacting the supply of certain root crops, food crops, and livestock, in addition for increased demand for dining out, alcoholic beverages, etc., and rental prices, that put upward pressure on the inflation rate.
The foreign reserves are at a record high with 3.3 billion reserves, which is the equivalent of 33.3 weeks of import cover. In terms of the debt position, Barbados' debt continues on a downward trajectory, ending at 114.3 million at the end of March. Following the presentation, Dr. Greenidge took some questions and responded in this manner when asked if Barbadians are bearing too high a burden of taxation.
Actually, tax burden now is lowest it's been in the last, but since the work program started. And that's because the base is wider. Much more emphasis on transaction-based taxes as opposed to indirect taxes. So the burden is lower, first point. The other point to mention, and this is purely looking at it from economics, we perhaps are one of the most well provided for public services. You go to any other region in the Caribbean or any countries, things like transportation and everything are not free. So that's the question. It's all a balance. You get a provision of public services, you're going to need taxes to pay for it. So the question is, if we want government or the fiscal authorities not to increase debt, but we want the provision of service that we are accustomed to, then there will be taxes. There's no about it. Then the question is, if you want to give us some taxes, what service do you don't want?
While the data reflects a growth in the economy, criticisms have been made that Barbadians are not feeling the benefits.
The fact that you have one of the lowest unemployment rate on history means you're starting to get inclusive growth. More people are employed than ever before. That's a sign of inclusive growth happening.
A number of factors will drive Barbados' economy in 2024, including increased airlift capacity and the highly anticipated ICC T20 World Cup. Wendy, those were some of the highlights coming out of today's press conference.